And it looks like we do. So that being the case, we'll call this meeting to order. Tonight, we've got some heavyweight guests here to help us out. And, they're young and talented and very busy. So I'm very thankful for the guests that have shown up tonight. And there's a few of them I've been trying to ask to join these meetings. Just to give our guests a little heads up, we've got a couple of internal items that we have to just run through real quick that are in our bylaws that we do every meeting. So if you guys can just stand by a few more minutes, and then we'll be right with you guys. The first item on our agenda is approving the agenda the first item on the agenda is approving the agenda. And so, so if anybody has any recommended changes, ideas, thoughts, let us know. And if not, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion made to approve the agenda.
Oh, look, I'm all over. See, this time of night, you got to eat, kind of get the kids ready, turn things around. So it's kind of where I am. But is there a second?
I second it.
All right. So minutes are approved, or agendas approved, back and forth. Let's go ahead and do the let's go ahead and do the call the vote on that real quick.
Yeah.
Ms. Robinson.
Okay, sure. Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Ms. Gilmore? Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
It's probably on mute.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And Mr. Watson?
Yes. Okay, so the agenda is approved. The next item on our agenda is the adoption of minutes. Is there any recommended changes for the minutes from the previous meeting? No recommended changes. Okay, is there a motion to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
I second it.
All right, Max, can you do the roll
Sure.
on the minutes? Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Oh, yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
And Mr. Watson?
Yes. Okay, so the minutes are approved. All right, so got a couple of announcements tonight. One, in case you guys didn't notice, there was an election last week, and we have a new president-elect and a new vice president, the first African-American female vice president. It's pretty exciting news. I think a positive mindset is on our way. I know we're not supposed to be political. I was, the last several years, there's been a lot of negative, divisive language that's come from up top. And I think that, we're going to see a major change. I kind of saw a clip earlier from when the president was recommending people take bleach. And, I'm just glad that, those types of things, that way of thinking, and find people on both sides, and all those numerous sound bites, I think that type of thing begins to affect the way we even treat each other and look at the world. So really excited about that. And I think the sky's the limit. And, just really glad to see this is happening. Of course, we'll see what happens over the next maybe 60 days as the change of power occurs. The other thing, in terms of our work as a civilian review board, in the General Assembly, during a special session, they did approve the police civilian oversight bill. And, that's been a main topic. And, for our work from really when we first got started, and it sounds like the way everything is kind of processed in Richmond, it's probably approved much faster than most bills become laws. And that takes me to why I invited one of our special guests, who's Miss Sally Hudson, because she is our, of course, local delegate who's been down in Richmond and on Zoom, back and forth, probably a little bit of both. And she's going to, well, let me backtrack a little bit. We have a couple of people here too that have not actually been part of our prior meetings. So, we're all lucky enough to have met Miss Delegate Hudson, over the last year. And we're also lucky enough that Dr. Webb is taking some time out of his busy schedule to join us tonight. And then we've got Kim Rolla from Legal Aid Justice Center. Hey, Kim, can you just kind of introduce yourself?
James, can I interrupt for a second? I put a note in the chat that our colleague, Miss Dee Dee, is on the phone. So just so we don't overlook her, I think Joe might be able to see her maybe on the phone.
Oh, perfect. Okay,
Thank
great.
you. I'm sorry.
Yep. Do we want to maybe give her a minute or two? Can you hear us?
Your phone is muted.
Dee Dee, if you can hear us,
she is-
go ahead and you're permitted to talk if you would unmute by pressing *6.
Okay. Can you hear us?
Can you hear?
All right.
Yes.
Good to hear from you. I hope everything is
you.
going well.
It's good.
Excellent. We've got a few different guests joining us tonight, and they're introducing themselves to the board and the public. So, Ms. Kim Rolla is about to go. I don't know if you can.
Yeah, sure, I can start.
Right.
Hey, Dee Dee. Actually,
Hey, Kim.
Dee Dee and I go way back. So my name is Kim Rolla. I am currently the interim legal director of Legal Aid Justice Center's Civil Rights and Racial Justice Program. I, prior to that, was actually a housing attorney at LAJC and used to work in the Charlottesville office. So I know a lot of the folks from the Public Housing Association of Residents, and you have really good folks on this board. I'm really excited to talk with you tonight. But the reason I think that Mr. Watson invited me is that since 2017, in my role at LAJC, have been helping the Charlottesville community kind of coalesce around police accountability demands. And when a group called the People's Coalition came together, Legal Aid Justice, and they came together around a demand for a civilian review board for the Charlottesville Police Department, Legal Aid Justice Center has been providing legal support to that group since 2017. So we really, from walking with you all, the community members that are here, listening to this meeting, some of you that step up onto this board, really our experience supporting you in the work that you were doing is what led to the legislation that was introduced during special session. If folks have not told you enough already, Charlottesville really was looked to as a leader across the entire state when they were thinking about what changes need to be made to the state code for civilian oversight to be as effective and robust as possible in Virginia. So I think it's a little bit maybe too much of my intro, but to say like I was really involved in that special session. But I want to say any wisdom that I brought to that, the majority of it came from walking with you all, and I'm like really happy to be invited back to talk about now what how that legislation can be used to further your work and the community's priorities in Charlottesville.
All right, thank you, Kim. And our next guest, who you guys probably have never heard of, never seen him anywhere, the great gentleman, Dr. Webb, if you can introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to be here with you. And Mr. Watson, thanks so much for inviting me out. Actually, just earlier this afternoon, I was teaching a class at the University of Virginia. I'm the Director of Health Policy and Equity, and was teaching a class about criminal justice reform more broadly. And Mr. Watson was gracious enough to join me along with Jim Hingley and Erica Basilio from the Fountain Fund. I think for me, I come to this space with with a unique perspective. Certainly, we know that health is in all policies, and as a physician, someone who works on social determinants of health, I'm always interested in how our systems impact the health and well-being of our community. And so I'm excited to be part of the conversation. But even beyond that, in my time working in the Obama White House, I did work specifically with the Department of Justice on some criminal justice reform issues, the 21st Century Policing Task Force, and some of the work that they did. And that was a part of my efforts with the My Brother's Keeper initiative in the Obama White House. So I'm excited to be a part of the conversation. I'm excited that this work is continuing to move forward, and grateful that you all would invite me to join you today.
All right, appreciate it. Got a question for you real quick. First I want to salute you for your effort and running a tremendous campaign in a district that's the size of New Jersey. Very, very, diverse from end to end. One of the questions though, as you were going around the state and you were meeting different people, and I was watching you on Instagram and Facebook and seeing you in some very rural places, right, where they've probably never met a African-American doctor, when you were talking to various people in completely different parts of the state, at the end of the day, what were some of the common themes that you were seeing across the 5th district that people were concerned about?
I think at its core, everybody just wants opportunities to succeed. And so whether you're in urban spaces or rural spaces, no matter the race or ethnicity, the sexual orientation or gender identity, everyone really just wants a chance. And I think that, we gained a lot of common ground by talking about issues like economic mobility, issues like investing in education, issues like rural broadband access, just that core, those fundamentals that make sure everybody has a chance. That includes stuff like access to healthcare. That includes that idea of not just public safety, but also justice. And I think that having those conversations thoughtfully really is the key. There's 21 counties and 2 cities in this district. Every one of them is different. Every one is unique. But I think that one thing that I learned is that when you enter those spaces with really an ear to listen rather than talking at people, but really kind of meeting them where they are and listening to what they're bringing to the conversation, you have a chance to be effective. And so, while we're disappointed we fell short, I think that we made kind of our campaign, our argument that this is what representation should look like. It should look like listening. It should look like engaging everybody.
Well, yeah, I really appreciate everything that you're doing. And it's been very honored to point to my sons and say, hey, look at this gentleman. Here's somebody you can grow up to be just like him. Okay, so moving around over to Delegate Hudson, if you can give us a sort of a recap and summary of the Police Civilian Oversight Bill that was passed in Richmond, that would be excellent.
Sure. So thanks for inviting me to come back and join you tonight. Let me start by echoing what Kim said, which is that Charlottesville set the pace for this debate in Richmond. And so we owe enormous gratitude to all of you and to your predecessors on the initial Civilian Review Board. I know that it can have felt a little bit like moving in fits and starts here, but you really are on the vanguard for Virginia. So I appreciate all of you for stepping up to that challenge and continuing to push the frontier of how we do justice in this state. I think when we were talking about all the many bills before the General Assembly, there were lots of bills that would mandate that law enforcement treat people fairly. What is fundamentally different about this bill is that it realizes that sometimes things will go wrong and that we need an outlet for people to have a safe place to go when they want to tell somebody that something went wrong, and they have a reliable place to expect to find justice. We can pass as many laws as we want governing law enforcement behavior, but this is really the one that ensures that there is meaningful oversight and accountability if things do miss the mark. And so that's what I think is so powerful about this bill and the work that you're doing. I think you by now have probably heard about some of the key features. I think that thanks to the hard work of attorneys like Kim, we got the core things on your wish list. So the bill will authorize subpoena power. The bill will authorize binding disciplinary authority, which I think is really important. That's what ensures you'll get access to the records that you need to do a thorough investigation and then be able to mete out consequences if they're in order. I think you also know that it's enabling legislation. And so that means that those powers can be granted, but we still have a lot of work to do here at the local level to ensure that the city council takes us up on that offer and uses the full menu in drafting the new ordinance that we'll all be working toward. The other piece that I think is really important to your work and was the hard pill to swallow in the negotiations is the delayed enactment clause. So this bill will not take effect until July 1st of 2021. We had hoped to get something to go in effect this winter so that you all could really get up and running sooner. That was a trade that was made in the negotiations to ensure that sheriffs were also included in the initial bill. There was a view on behalf of some of the patrons that if we didn't do both police departments and sheriffs at the same time, that we wouldn't be able to come back and get that package. And so we agreed to authorize these powers for sheriffs and police with the understanding that we still have some work to do in January when we go back to flesh out the details on sheriffs. The sheriff's part is not so important for Charlottesville because the sheriff plays a relatively limited role in our law enforcement here, but there are about a third of Virginians who live in localities that are wholly policed by sheriffs. And so that was something that we did sort of in solidarity with Loudoun County and a bunch of our surrounding areas, Fluvanna, Greene, to ensure that they also will have the opportunity to have meaningful law enforcement oversight. So I think one of the big questions that we have in the coming months is how do we best support you in continuing to do really meaningful, productive work to tee up what you can do as soon as the law catches up in July. And I know something that we had talked about last time I was with James and Kim, we were with the People's Coalition and we started brainstorming a little bit about things we might set in motion in the meantime before the ordinance is legally in effect, so that you can lay some of that groundwork and make good use of all the talent that we have assembled here now.
All right, that was excellent. Just to be clear, the current law that was signed by Governor Northam, that does not include sheriff's departments, right?
It does include sheriffs, but we recognize that we have some more details to flesh out there, and I might defer to Kim a little bit on what some of those details are.
Yeah, so the way the legislation was passed, it actually defines law enforcement agency as a police department, either a local police department or a campus police department. And it defines law enforcement officer as someone who is either has arresting authority for one of those law enforcement agencies or a civilian who's employed by those police departments. And it explicitly says that law enforcement officer does not include sheriff's deputies. So the way that this is written, it kind of defines out sheriff's departments, but I totally agree with Delegate Hudson that my understanding is that the delayed enactment is intended to say before we hit July 1, 2021, that the legislature will have a chance to revisit either this specific statutory provision or other mechanisms for ensuring sheriff accountability. So kind of saying that we want them to go hand in hand, but the way that this piece of legislation is written, it does not encompass sheriffs, which again, I think as Delegate Hudson said, they're not the primary law enforcement agency in Charlottesville. So I think that, your organizing for the last 3 years has focused on the Charlottesville Police Department. And I absolutely think that the tools that are in this piece of legislation can further that work. But I do think it's important for us to express, the importance of, for many reasons, right? Sheriffs are also in control of many local jails. So again, that's going to be an issue in 2021. I know it's probably an issue folks feel really deeply about, but that they're not covered by this.
The other piece that I would add is that it's not uncommon for delayed enactment clauses to be used for this very purpose, to say, hey, we got 2/3 of the negotiations done on this, let's get that down on paper, and then let's put on a delayed enactment clause to buy ourselves some time to finish part of the job. My understanding, and I'd also ask Kim to confirm or deny this, is that sheriffs were the only piece of the negotiations where we had clearly agreed to do that, that was the purpose of the delayed enactment clause. I have heard whispers from some folks that they are concerned that, say, subpoena power or disciplinary authority would be clawed back in the regular session in January, and that perhaps the delayed enactment clause was used to leave those as open questions that we would revisit in the regular session. I have heard questions about that, and my response to them thus far has been not at all. I have not heard anything from members of the General Assembly that suggests that those were unsettled matters. I think that those were things that we firmly committed to in the special session and have every reason to believe will continue until July. Kim, does that sound right to you?
Yeah, so, and, Delegate Hudson would know this better than I would, but, what happened was that, there was a Senate version of this bill and a House version of the bill that passed their respective chambers and went into what's called a conference committee. And we can actually, us, civilian folk, we're not in that committee. We don't get to watch it being streamed. It's kind of a black box that legislation then comes out of. But what I think is really important to know is that the Senate and the House passed versions of this bill that included the subpoena power and final disciplinary authority. And when it went into conference, some of the negotiation points, one was whether this was going to be, as Delegate Hudson described, enabling legislation that a locality would be able to act on, or whether it would be a mandate that said every single jurisdiction around the state has to create these bodies. So it is enabling legislation. And another big question mark was the inclusion of sheriffs. The bill that was passed by the House did include sheriffs. And then the conference committee, the kind of compromise that came out, did not. So I do think my impression was that, there was some bargaining, and obviously, as Delegate Hudson said, the House members felt it was very important to address sheriff accountability. And my understanding is similar to hers, that one of the ways that the Senate kind of gestured towards, yes, we are serious, that we will be addressing this in 2021, was the delayed enactment piece. So I sincerely hope that they will not revisit the subpoena power and final disciplinary authority. Those were two pieces that, from our work in Charlottesville and also from our work in Richmond, we heard repeatedly as being key features of effective oversight.
So that's just one clear message that I would hope to take back from Richmond to Charlottesville, is that I don't think we should let anyone suggest that the delayed enactment clause means that those important provisions to Charlottesville are precarious. I haven't heard anything to suggest that.
One thing too, sort of in layman's terms for a lot of us who maybe aren't lawyers, or for folks that aren't as familiar. So like in Charlottesville, our sheriff handles management, and correct me if I'm wrong, they manage the court system, right? The whole court process. They distribute civil warrants, I believe. And whereas in Fluvanna and maybe Madison, if I'm not mistaken, or Culpeper, one of those two or both, the sheriff is more kind of like our chief. Is that pretty much the case? Where, I kind of see the sheriff here doing more administrative type duties and some other duties, but depending on the locality and how it's structured with sheriffs versus police chiefs, like here also our sheriff is an elected official. So some would say, well, the Civilian Review Board is the people that vote for that, right? Every 2 years or 4 years, that's kind of when the public gets to, give their input. But I don't know that, that everybody really knows, kind of the difference in how a locality has a sheriff's department may work versus kind of our model here in Charlottesville. Can you just break that down real quick, Kim? I may have butchered it.
Yeah,
yeah.
Well, I think you're exactly right. I mean, there are certain jurisdictions where, like I said, the sheriffs have primary law enforcement responsibility, which means that, similar to you said, like, if you call for service from a law enforcement agency, it's going to be a sheriff's deputy that responds rather than, a police department officer. I think one thing, just for the sake of this group here, the ordinances and the bylaws that were passed by Charlottesville were specifically focused on the Charlottesville Police Department. So I do think it's really important, as Delegate Hudson was saying, when we kind of think about, is this legislation solid ground that you can build on? The answer is yes, right? Like, your work is focused on the Charlottesville Police Department, and they are clearly covered by this legislation. So that is not in any way to minimize the importance of creating tools that reach every Virginian that needs to have that level of accountability in their county, in their town as well. But I think like for your work, this bill is clearly covering the Charlottesville Police Department.
Well, we met previously. Oh, good. Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say on an entirely different issue, I noticed that about 75% of the legislation concerns grievance procedures. What has that got to do with us?
Yeah, so it's actually, and I'm sorry, I'll go first, then please jump in, Delegate Hudson. But that's actually not changed law. If you're looking at the 6-page PDF, there's a tiny change to the municipal grievance procedure, which basically says that if a civilian oversight body makes a binding disciplinary determination, so the locality has decided, the locality passes an ordinance that says some certain type of complaint that we think is a very serious complaint, we're going to let the civilian oversight body make the determination of whether an officer violated policy or law and determine what the appropriate discipline is. What that change to the municipal grievance procedure says just clarifies that officer still has the ability that any employee of a municipality would to access the local grievance procedure. So it's not really, the law didn't create a municipal grievance procedure. There's just one tiny change that makes clear that any officer who's subject to a binding disciplinary determination still has that access to that municipal grievance. So it's a little confusing because we use the kind of shorthand of final disciplinary authority, but really think about final meaning that rather than right now, under your ordinance, what you would be doing is making a recommendation to the chief to say, we think that the appropriate course is, we think that this should be sustained, and that the appropriate discipline, is X or Y. But it's still the police chief's ultimate determination whether to sustain that complaint, whether to find that officer should be disciplined. If the Charlottesville makes the decision to actually put that in the hands of the civilian oversight body, that officer will still have, the due process of the municipal grievance procedure, but it will take it outside the police department. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. And there's one issue that I have been raised by another member of this group. I noticed there's very specific language about non-voting members.
Right.
And, they can not be a current law enforcement employee, not be a past law enforcement employee of this town. What's the rationale? I mean, could they maybe vote on policy, but not on, cases? It just seems, I'm not sure what the rationale was.
Yes, we need clarification on that moving forward.
So my understanding is that, again, it's enabling authority. And so if you wanted to have those members included in the new ordinance, you could, but they're not mandated.
Yeah, I think the way Kim, I think they're pretty much forbidden, actually.
Yeah, so and I guess to make sure that I understand your question, the question is kind of like, why was that provision included in the law? So I can tell you that. So the way I will say, the way that I read the statute is that if the authority that is, the authority that localities are enabled to invoke under this statutory provision is used, then they must abide by the provisions of this law. So I think that it's true if a body is created under this statute that it must meet all of these provisions. And that includes defining who voting members can be and who, the specific criteria of non-voting members, such as retired law enforcement or people with, it's retired law enforcement. And I will say that language evolved as the legislation moved through the General Assembly. Originally, the only folks who were prevented altogether were current law enforcement officers. And then there is a provision added that clarified that even former retired law enforcement agency officers that were employed by that specific agency would not be eligible. And I really think that the motivation for that was that, there was a real call there, and I think this may be where you and Mr. C are coming from, that, or Mr. Say, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, that there's a C, Mr. C. There's a need for that kind of expertise, people that have that like deep experience, that you would want them in the room to have these conversations. And the counterpoint that we heard repeatedly from that is that there can be a real chilling effect from people being in the room when these conversations are being had, that have power that could be used to retaliate against people if they're a current law enforcement officer, or if they have relationships and connections with people that may have that power. So there was a real conversation about what it means to create a real place of community power and real community voice that wouldn't be dominated or, again, chilled in any way by the presence of people with certain affiliations with law enforcement. So that's really where that balance came from. There were pretty deep conversations about this, about how training and resources for these bodies could also provide that expertise and guidance, and that would be important. So there's not strong deference to one voice, but rather we're supporting all of the community members and developing that expertise and really serving fully on the body. So that's where that language came from. I realize that it's fairly prescriptive, but I will say the legislators I talked to felt it was really important to protect this space, again, for community members to have the support and space to use their voice fully.
Kim, is it correct to say that if you wanted to have a non-voting member who was former law enforcement from another locality, that is an option that's available to you, but it is not required?
Yes, that's my reading of the statute.
Real quick, Philip, if you have, you've kind of made some comments to me about concerns about, you're feeling that in order to sort of bring the community together with the police, that that there's value in having a vote, right? I mean, you've kind of expressed, hey, I'm part of this board, I'm former police, but I have no vote, and you can elaborate on that.
I hate to be a big B, but we have an agenda that allows for public comment, especially since we have our guests here. Can we get back to that, and then we can get Philip to answer that question when we get to board comments? Could that be possible? Because I know our time can get by really quick for us.
Yeah, we can do that. I just know he's been that's been something one of his kind of ongoing concerns. Yeah. But okay,
well, it sounds like a bylaw type, work session type question as we look at these bylaws again.
That will be taken care of in bylaws, because something was sent by Bellamy regarding bylaws. So we can address that, and then council will have to step in, and I've asked for direction from them. So really no further comment needs to be made at this point. But thank you.
Yep. All right. So as we're moving forward, of course, we have the big task in front of us to revise the existing ordinance. We've got, as Delegate Hudson pointed out, we've got a menu now, right? And at one point, pretty much the law said that localities can establish an advisory board, an advisory oversight board, and there wasn't really much more teeth or powers or anything beyond that. And so, between now and let's say May, we want to be able to dig into the bylaw or the ordinance and, make changes so that we can make use of these powers. And as Delegate Hudson explained earlier, we've also got to have buy-in from City Council. So, it's going to be an interesting process, particularly during the pandemic, and trying to conduct workshops and, make all that work in maybe a Zoom environment or a hybrid Zoom/in-person environment. But one of the reasons I asked Kim to join us is, because I know that she's well experienced guru and all this stuff, and she can kind of give us some light or some ideas of things to keep in mind and look into as we're moving forward throughout the upcoming months. So Kim, if you can share some of those concepts and ideas, that would be excellent.
Yeah, so I don't know how in the weeds I can get here, because I'll also say, obviously you have legal counsel that can advise you on that process. One thing I would really suggest, and I think that the group is considering this, is to have some dialogue with the initial civilian review board that really had a deep dive into community listening and kind of hearing from the Charlottesville community what the priorities were for this body, because they presented a set of ordinances and bylaws to the city council. There were some changes made to those before they were enacted. But I think a really important thing to remember is that initial civilian review board kind of created their, I don't want to say ideal vision, but what they thought was the best that was possible under the prior law. And that landscape has shifted, right? I think there was some discussion on this body of whether you would prefer to have kind of the ordinances and the bylaws that were proposed by that initial civilian review board. But now I think that, the way that they would conceptualize meeting the needs of the community, or the best way to do that may be really different. Because I think it's like thinking about doing a project, if you only had a hammer and a screwdriver, and then someone gives you I don't know, an Allen wrench and a nail gun or something, right? You might approach it differently. So I think that it would be really useful, so you're not rebuilding the bicycle, to go back to the initial civilian review board and really ask if, I know, for example, they really wrestled with how to comply with the Law Enforcement Officers Procedural Guarantee Act in drafting their proposed ordinances and bylaws. And this new law specifically says that if a civilian oversight body is established by a locality, that the officers that are under that law enforcement agency are no longer subject to the Law Enforcement Officers Procedural Guarantee Act. So I think there are specific things about how they crafted the ordinances and bylaws that may be different now. So I think that's a really important thing. I think they're a real font of wisdom that I would really suggest you all have that conversation, whether it's inviting them to a meeting or other kinds of work sessions. I think that would be really useful. Again, there are the kind of two big tools that are new that Delegate Hudson laid out are the subpoena power tool and final disciplinary authority. This is maybe, people I'm sure have a general sense of the colloquial term subpoena. People understand what that is, but I want to emphasize that that's not just compelling a person. So in an individual complaint context, it's not just compelling a witness to come before a body. It's also the ability to access documents, records. So I think it's really true what Delegate Hudson said, that civilian oversight bodies are really important accountability mechanisms when harm has occurred, to make sure that there's a process that the community feels trust in, that there will be accountability if there's misconduct and appropriate discipline. But it's not just these bodies don't have to just be responsive, retroactive response to harm that has already occurred. I think one of the really powerful things about the model that Charlottesville built is that it's also looking systemically at, it's doing policy audits, making policy recommendations. It's looking at data to identify trends and think about interventions we can make that aren't just about an individual who has experienced something that we think is inappropriate, but is saying how can we make this entire structure function better? And I think I think subpoena power has something to say about that too. I know there's been a lot of conversations about access to records, to data. I think that's something, again, I'm not going to make any specific proposals to you, but I hope that people think about that, the use of that tool broadly, given the mandate that the Civilian Review Board in Charlottesville has. And I do think that the final disciplinary authority piece is something that has not been discussed robustly, right? I mean, this is it requires line drawing. The statute the law that was passed says, certain serious, and I'm not actually don't have the language right in front of me. Let's see, that involves serious breaches of departmental or professional standards as defined by the locality. So, I think that's not a conversation that's happened that I'm aware of in Charlottesville about what, if there is a type of complaint when we are talking about individual harm, is there a type of individual harm that you all think is serious enough or has been like a serious enough pattern in Charlottesville that the Civilian Review Board should have the final say over those kinds of complaints? Again, that's not a conversation the initial Civilian Review Board had because that wasn't an option for them. So I do think there's value in going back to that group and kind of hearing what they learned from their really deep dive in community engagement. And then I think there are specific questions about those two pieces and those two tools, how you think those could help meet those community needs. I don't know if that's specific enough, but.
Oh, that's great. Does anybody on our board have questions or ideas you want to put out there? No. Okay, well, I know our distinguished guests have busy schedules and a little bit tired. We do have a public comment window right now. And if you guys can stand by for public comment / questions. And then after that, we'll just kind of let y'all go, have some dinner, chill out, and get back to your family. I know Dr. Webb's definitely ready to get back. I'm sure your family's also, Dr. Webb, happy to see you more after all the traveling. And it's amazing because this gentleman never looks tired. I mean, he just, treating COVID patients, and he does a podcast on Monday and running a campaign. It's amazing. But again, does anybody on our board have any questions for our guests, ideas? No? Okay, so if we can, let's see, we don't have Mr. Wheeler. We've got Joe Rice is our MC
Yes,
of all things call-in.
I'd be happy to, Chair Watson, and I'd like to welcome our registered attendees to tonight's meeting. This will be the first of 2 public comment opportunities. For this public comment section, we'll select up to 5 speakers in the order of hands raised. If you are not called upon, there will be an additional public comment section without limit prior to adjournment. If anyone at this time would like to address the board, please click the raise hand icon, or if you're joining us by phone, press *9. Once we enable your audio, please unmute your mic and you will have 3 minutes for comment. Right now, I see 2 hands raised, and Mr. Harold Foley has had his hands raised up the whole time. So let's get him in here. Harold, you are on with the board. You have 3 minutes.
Hey, thank y'all so much. I appreciate, Kim Webb, Kim, Delegate Hudson, for being here. And I thank the board for allowing me to speak tonight. One thing I want to say is, Mr. C, for the board members, community folks didn't want the law enforcement folks to vote because we felt like, they felt like it always been a problem when it comes to police officers getting off. And they feel like that would be the same way with the Civilian Review Board, where the police officer will have bias and will be not thinking about the community folks. And I think it's really unfortunate that, you are pushing that because, like I said before, it's really the community who spoke and said they didn't want that to happen. Secondly, I think as much work that y'all need to do, if you're going to do this before July, y'all might want to meet every other week because it's a lot of work to put in to what y'all about to do. I'll be honest with you, the community folks fought for this to happen. Community folks wanted this amazing bill to happen, and we want to make sure that it's going to be successful. Because I think, without the community folks, it won't happen, right? And I tell you, community folks is watching. And if things get awry, we're going to definitely apply pressure. And so, like I said, I think it's important that you might want to think about doing two meetings every other week, so you can get this right, because it's a lot of work to do a ordinance. There's a lot of research you need to do. There's a lot of, if you want to do this by July 1st. And I think, folks want this done by July 1st because we fought so hard for this important bill to be, enacted in Virginia. I think it's amazing that Charlottesville has the third civilian review board, and at the same time, the General Assembly said we need to give you the teeth that you need to be able to be successful. And so, with that said, I hope, and if you need any help with any situation, that you reach out to folks that have done the research before or have done ordinance before, because like I said, it's a long drawn out process. And the initial board, the initial CRB had a hard way to go, and they did some amazing work in 12 months. So thank y'all so much. And I look forward to hearing from you and talking to you if you need me. All right, bye.
Okay, next up, we have Joyce Davis. And Joyce, you are now on with the board.
Hi, good evening. I'm Joyce Davis. I'm calling you from Richmond, Virginia, and I didn't expect to make public comments, so please excuse my around the house attire, if you can see me. But I'm a policy advisor to Richmond City Council, and hello to all of you, to Delegate Hudson, to members of this body. I've used the materials that you all have written and a lot of your minutes from meetings in order to cultivate the legislation that we put forth in Richmond so that we could have a task force to establish a citizen review board. And so we've been trying to utilize some of the experiences that you've had. So my first question is, can we call on you at a later date so that we can kind of work through our process? We are currently in the stage of selecting our members, and we are having the same problem that you all just talked about with having police officers on our board. We had a police chief, former police chief, to apply. And so we've gone back and forth with that, and council will look at it again at the organizational development meeting in about 2 weeks. And so most likely I will call on someone. My other question is, we have an overrepresentation of advocacy groups. And so that I noticed that your group here is balanced and you look like you get along very well. But I wonder, with the advocacy groups being overrepresented, how we will keep that balance and stay focused. And so I'm sure I will ask questions later about that. But again, I just wanted to make you aware that we in Richmond are trying to follow your lead. We admire the work that you're doing, and we will have many questions for Delegate Hudson and Kim Rolla. And for you, Mr. Watson. So I'm sure you will see or hear about us again, and I hope that you will pledge your support to help us. And I don't know why you're smiling, but thank you for the opportunity to make comments.
I was just smiling because I'm eager to help and would love to be a resource.
Yeah.
However you can.
Thank you.
Okay, if any of our other attendees would like to speak, we can take up to 3 more speakers. If you're interested to speaking to the board, it's please click your raise hand icon or press *9 on the phone. Chair Watson, that appears to be it.
Okay, appreciate that. All right, so again, if anybody would like to ask our distinguished guests 1 or 2 more questions, before we let them go off to their personal time. This is the moment.
Well, I'm on mute. I don't have a comment. I mean, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment whenever that's appropriate.
Okay, well, if you want to comment now, go for it.
Okay, I will take that opportunity as given. Absolutely. I just wanted to say that I appreciate the work, and it's the very heavy work that has been done by many, many folks from BIPOC communities around this state, and especially, the heavy work that's been done by a lot of women that are in those communities. Without their stories and their voices, Delegate Hudson and Kim may not have had much to do on this particular issue this time. They really worked very, very hard from both this community and from other places around the state to get this bill, very important oversight bill, negotiated and legislated and signed by the governor. And now we are, where we need to start talking with our council. And so it's not over, my old expression, it's not over by a country mile. And as the conversation was, there are many, many communities that they have enforcement through the sheriff's departments. And I know a couple of them north of here that are very problematic. They even have a small petition going around to recall one of the sheriffs. I don't know that it'll go very far, but bless them for starting that. And so I'm very, very excited to start this heavy work going forward. We came in June. We made a vote about how we felt the ordinance should be looking. They specifically wanted to go back to the one that had been adopted by the original PCRB, like Kim was saying, the hard work that they did. And so we were told to wait because the special session of the General Assembly was going to take up a lot of these issues surrounding criminal justice reform and oversight and things like that. And so we waited and waited. Now that's done, and we see what the hard work of Delegate Hudson and her colleagues, provided for the state. And so now, I don't want to wait too much longer because, like you said, July 1st will be here very soon. And, there are, particular prescriptions when it comes to, passing local ordinances about timelines of when things have to be a public hearing and when you have to, legislate them and things like that. So I hope that we don't get stuck on when we're going to start, being able to meet, because I think I agree with Harold that twice a month has got to be a standard, and somehow during this pandemic to try and carve out what those times look like, I think is incumbent upon us to ask for and even demand if we have to. I wish Mr. Payne were here, but I know there's a budget work session, and so he's got to be there for that conversation tonight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Again, any more comments?
And can I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I would like to thank our guests for coming. I know how busy and how hard you guys work, and really do appreciate you being here and trying to help us with this. It's quite a task, and it's a long road ahead and a lot of work. And I am just hoping and praying that it will be something that we can definitely get accomplished. The worrisome part of it for me is having the support of City Council. That's my worry. Even with what has been passed, I am just truly hoping that they will be able to, and that they're willing to help us the way that they should. With that being said, that's really about all I have, but I just want to take the time just to thank you. I can't thank you enough for being here and offering the guidance that you offer. I truly appreciate it, because I'm almost like a deer in headlights. This is all new to me. I have quite a lot of learning, a lot of things to learn in regards to what's going on. I just know that I have a passion of wanting to help this community to make it right. So again, with that being said, thank you guys so very much, and have a good evening and stay safe.
All right. Oh, looks like Miss Robertson just popped up. I don't know if you had a comment or if you just popped up.
I have a question, so I
Okay.
popped up intentionally.
Okay.
This is for either Kim or Delegate Hudson. Have there been any discussions about things that might need to be adjusted, for example, in some other legislation like FOIA in order to facilitate the work of the CRB? So I'm thinking specifically of whether or not there might be a need for an additional closed meeting exemption or some other exemption to help protect the privacy of people coming forward, at least through some portion of the process, if not, ultimately, all the way through. But I don't know if there had been any discussions about that at all. And I'm thinking more of the privacy of people who are bringing forth complaints to be looked into, whether or not there's been any thought given to allowing some amount of privacy, at least up to the point at which a public hearing might be involved in front of the board.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, Lisa. I can actually say that there were early discussions, I know, among some legislators about the intersection with public records law, but actually I don't want to say the other direction, but from a different angle, where they were thinking about, if these bodies are meant to facilitate kind of a public forum, right, where we feel like the community is having these open discussions. People were wondering whether certain discretionary exemptions that currently exist would create a barrier to that. So, there's a public records discretionary exemption that allows law enforcement agencies to withhold documents related to disciplinary records. So that's something that folks discussed, the intersection of that, and they decided to not address that during special session. I think part of that may have just been there's a lot happening during what was supposed to be a short session, but I really appreciate your question from the other angle. I don't actually know that there were discussions around that. I do think that there are certainly FOIA and public records implications with this bill, and if legislators would have the appetite to return to that, I think what you just raised is something that they should be considering as well.
I think if there's an opportunity to take that up, it's definitely worth having a conversation about in the General Assembly, because I know that I believe that the board's going to be faced with some situations where people may want to have a conversation. Maybe they haven't decided yet whether they want to officially bring forward something for investigation, or maybe there's going to be a certain process that leads up to a public hearing, but you don't necessarily want the entire world able to FOIA things about a complaining person until you've had a chance to vet what the complaint's about and sort of do some work on it. So I think we're already seeing a little bit of, we're having some situations present themselves already, even before the hearings are getting started, where we'd just like it to be clear, and we'd like the board to have the ability to make some discretionary decisions depending on the posture in which something comes forward.
And Lisa, I would just thank you for raising that concern and echo Kim in saying that I don't think that I have heard discussions of that yet, but I do know that all of the FOIA issues that were raised during special session were deferred to the general session, and that there's a long list of them. So I think there are a number of natural opportunities for us to try to merge those conversations. There's a lot of things, I think, about criminal justice reform that intersect with our public records law. And so I can keep that on our list of things to keep an eye on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any more comments? Nope. Okay, well, thank you very much, Kim, Sally, and Dr. Webb, for joining us. And hope you guys don't get too far away from us, because as we're building this thing out and having those monthly meetings, there's going to be some times where we need those big, bright brains you guys have. So, I mean, you guys are leaders of today and the leaders of the future. So again, I appreciate your time, and then hopefully we can reach out to you as we're moving along. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our members here and to your forebearers on the founding CRB, and all to our community leaders at the People's Coalition and Harold Foley, and especially to Kim and our teammates at the Legal Aid Justice Center. This really was a village effort, and I'm so excited to join all of you in it.
Appreciate
Thank you for your efforts.
Yeah, I do want to say just one more thing. Like I really, the pleasure is like all mine to be here with you this evening. Like the amount of work that the CRBs have moved is just incredible. I just wanted to speak to, I know a couple you mentioned just kind of the incredible work that's ahead of you to move, and reiterate one more time how much this has been a ripple throughout Virginia. Like when it was so interesting to hear, I live in Richmond, to hear Joyce give her public comment about how much Richmond looks to you for guidance. Both community members look to the initial civilian review board and the guidance they've sought. But just so you know, Henrico is now reaching out to Richmond for guidance, right? Like this is rippling across the state, and like the heavy load that you're carrying, it is just incredible what that has done throughout the state. And I can't tell you all enough, like how grateful I am for you guys to step forward and continue this work. So thank you so much. And like anything that LAJC or any of us can ever do, please let us know, because this is just, it's incredibly powerful. I'm grateful for you all.
All right, thank you. Okay, good night. See you guys. Appreciate it. Okay, the next item on our agenda is, what is the next item on our agenda? It is the complaint intake process. One of the things that, I realize we need to make the public aware of is what, the complaint intake process, right? Because some people may not really be aware. And Bill's going to give a PowerPoint presentation of that process. And Bill,
thanks, James. And Mr. Rice has the slides, I believe. Yep. Okay. Yeah, James asked me to talk very briefly about the intake process, submitting and receiving complaints. This slide shows sort of a flow chart of all our activities. What I'm going to be talking about is in the red box at the top, so I'm not going to get into investigating complaints and what happens when we go to investigating complaints, but limit what I say to how we get the complaints in the system, what are the routes, what are the forms, what kind of information is needed to be submitted. There's a little arrow going from the complaint submitted to CPD to the complaint submitted to CRB, and I'll talk about that a little later. So next slide. Okay, first question is, who can file? Answer is any incident of Charlottesville. And people, the most common obviously are the person who is directly affected. A witness can also file a complaint even if they're not directly affected and they don't even know who was involved. They can still file a complaint. And again, family members or even some kind of representative can file a complaint as well. In the next slide. And you can send your complaints to either us at the CRB, and you can send by email, and you can send snail mail to us at our PO box. And similarly if you file with the Charlottesville Police Department, if you read their website, they ask you to sign a complaint. They ask you to return it in person by mail, or they tell you you can email Lieutenant Michael Gore. our experience has been that the police department does accept complaints in irregular form. If they get an email, they don't need to have the form, which is shown on the next slide. But whether or not you use the form, the thing to remember is that the more information you provide, the easier it is for the internal affairs folks to evaluate your complaint. So to the extent that you can describe in detail the date, the time, the location, what happened, which officers were involved, if you can remember that or ascertain that, and anyone who would be willing to talk about, to say that they saw the incident and support your claim. One thing to remember is that when we get a, that is the CRB gets a complaint, we automatically share it with the Charlottesville Police Department. And then we don't see it again until after they've done their internal review. If you file it with the Charlottesville Police Department, you'll notice that there's a little checkbox down the bottom of the form that says, I authorize you to release my complaint to the Civilian Review Board. Please check that box. And that makes it certain that we get, the CPD has been, rather good about sharing complaints with us. It's, when they get complaints filed by email, we often get copies anyway. So just to summarize on the next slide. You can file complaints either with the CRB or the Charlottesville Police. Complaints can be filed by any resident of Charlottesville who believes they have witnessed an episode of police misconduct. The official form is useful, but it's not absolutely required. And you can use snail mail or electronically. As I say, I think it's very important for us to stress that the more information you provide, the better. Currently, we're working on approaches for maintaining confidentiality. Of course, it's hard to review a complaint if we know who is involved. Nonetheless, it may have legitimate concerns about being harassed or retaliated against. So for the time being, I don't think you should hesitate to file a complaint. And again, we'll work out with Ms. Robertson, the extent to which we can get involved without revealing personal information that you don't want revealed. I don't know, James, do we have time for anybody to ask any questions, or do we move on?
I think we can answer a question or two. We're not set up to do a public comment right at this moment, but as far as the board, anybody on the board that may have questions.
This is a useful tool. Where will it live on the Charlottesville City website? Is it going to be just part of that? You go to the page that has all the different meetings and you just click. How would you know that this is in tonight's meeting packet versus it being on our little, whatever that web page is specifically for the PCRB? If somebody wants to look at that, or maybe even, use it for a class or something.
Oh, I think we should definitely, we need to get the word out because people don't know, they don't even know we exist. And to the extent that we can tell them, hey, look, we actually have these procedures and this is how you go about doing it. And maybe even disseminating forms. to support organizations, I think that would be very, very, very useful. I believe that we can ask Ms. Robinson to put this on the CRB website along with some of the other documents that we have up there now.
Yes, that's not a problem.
Yeah, thanks.
Right. Any other comments, questions, ideas related to complaint intake process? No.
Chair Watson.
Yes. Hey.
Hi, Chief Brackney.
How you doing? I was like, where'd you come from?
Yeah, I've been on it the whole time, but
Okay.
no video as you all normally request. The only thing I would say is in the video slide and presentation that the information is not as robust as it could, and it may lead individuals to believe that they cannot file complaints if they are not the affected person or guardianship or a witness. We take anonymous complaints. We take third party who are not affected and are not representing anyone. We take phone calls. If you call in the station, the majority of our complaints actually walk into the station. So there are actually much more robust ways to engage the system. And if that PowerPoint that you have lives there, may lead people to believe that the only way they can file a complaint is through those 3 ways that were just highlighted there in that process. So I just want you to be thoughtful about before you place that on there. If necessary, if you would like, I can work with Mr. Mendez. My presentation is already listed on our website. So we could even share that with yours so that you have as much information as possible. And then I will unmute myself, or I'll mute myself.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we don't want to be.
I restricted my.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I restricted myself to the material that was on the kudos and complaints webpage, and I guess I should have been aware that you are much more flexible than that. But I'm not sure everybody else is. So let's work together to clarify that.
Would love to. Thank you.
So I'll wait on your cue, Mr. Watson.
To vote on, are we voting? Is that what we're saying?
No, to let me know when it's okay to post on your webpage.
Okay, yeah, we'll make sure that we're we're providing the most accurate information, and yeah, we'll reach out to you when we get the final copy ready for upload. Sounds good. All right. So the next item that we have on our agenda is community outreach. I'm not sure if Ms. Johnson, I know she was at work and then she said she was going to get on the phone. Still out there, Ms. Johnson? Yeah, I think she might have. Nancy, do you have something for community outreach?
I mean, yeah, but I'd rather, just wait and see if Ms. Johnson gets, to the phone when she gets home.
Okay.
If we have some time towards the last quarter hour, maybe we can come back to that, if that's okay.
That sounds good. Okay, so moving on to the complaints received. Since we started in late June, we've got 8 complaints. We've got 4 that are open, none that have gone beyond the 75-day window. And we do have one that there has been a hearing request, and we're working on the process to hold a hearing. And we're targeting late January for being able to accommodate a hearing.
Chair Watson.
Good. Yep.
Just to clarify, I believe you'd said that 4 were open. There are 4 that are closed.
Mm-hmm.
3 that haven't hit the date yet.
Right.
And that 1. But just to make sure that we don't have the 4 that are open there.
Okay. Right. For a total of 8. Right. Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Moving on here. Okay.
That process, I know that we've had some emails about a little bit about the process that you're working on about making it how we're going to do this one or as more come. Is there a way to share that publicly? I mean, I know that we haven't really talked about it publicly, but is that in any type of status where it's kind of a draft kind of formulation for the process, or is there some more, things that need to be done to that particular process before it could be shared with the public?
So, it's the draft that you had an opportunity to comment on. I would defer to Lisa if she can answer, if she's still there, on whether it's at a stage where we can kick it out or required to kick it out to public comment at this moment. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Okay. I think that I'm going to kick it back to you. I don't have any legal issues with what is in the draft that you have available to look at. So,
okay.
But I do recommend, I think that as a board, each member should make sure to have read it and thoroughly understand it. And I think it's very important for it to be in the best shape that you as a board would like it in, and then, share it publicly to refine it. But these are going to be procedures that you are all going to live with, at least as you get started. So that's a long-winded way to say, I think it's fine to release it publicly now if you would like to, but I do think it's important that when you share it publicly, that each of you is very comfortable with what gets put out there. So don't put it out if any of you have questions or concerns about what's in it at this point.
I appreciate that. I've always got to hit my screen to see whether or not I'm on mute or not. All right, so moving along. Well, is there any comment about that? Group, anybody? No comments?
No, I just echoing what Lisa said. I think it's important to kind of I guess set the tone for where we want it to go as a board, and then have that public comment there later. The draft that's been pulled together is kind of a basic structure, but I think that there could be more input from us initially to kind of make it more robust, and then the community can add on to that afterwards, and then we can backtrack it to Ms. Robertson.
Lisa, I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, since I am a non-voting member, and if something gets released that I'm not in agreement with because I can't vote, and then some action is taken somewhere along the way, am I liable for that?
No. And I am aware, I believe Mr. Mendez contacted me, and one thing I'm going to start doing as we go along, as you all ask me questions like this one, I'm going to start putting responses together so we can build out sort of a handbook for all of you board members. But long story short, I think that just the review and adoption of policies and procedures is something that we'll all do together. I've got to help with the legal review, but nobody who's not in a position to vote on them can necessarily be said to have promoted or have adopted those policies or procedures. So I would say that to the extent that there can be liability for adopting a policy or procedure, anyone who can't vote would be excluded from that.
Thank you.
Thanks. And just to to gently prod, can you give us a little idea of when your opinion regarding our general liability might be available?
I will definitely have it before your next meeting, and hopefully before that. So let's say within the next week to 2 weeks.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you. Anybody got any more questions for Ms. Robertson? Nope.
Thanks, Lisa.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Next item is hiring legal representation. So about a week and a half ago, myself and Mr. Blair, there goes my son. I know you're excited, buddy. We interviewed
No, and I told you my tooth was still in.
He lost a tooth, which it's a beautiful thing.
All right.
I'll be with you in a little bit. Tooth Fairy's coming. So we interviewed a law firm to represent us. I had to sign a confidentiality agreement, so I'm not at will to say a whole lot from my understanding about the firm, but I can just say I was impressed and that they were highly qualified and very eager to support us. I think that my understanding is that the city is in negotiations with all the pricing and all that stuff. So stay tuned. I'm guessing sometime between now and early to mid-December. We'll get the word on that. As far as the executive director position, talked with Mr. Blair about that this week. He said they whittled that list of applicants down to about 5 applicants. And from that 5, there's going to be a panel in which 2 of us will interview those 5 people. So one of the things we got to do tonight too is decide, or if folks would like to volunteer, if 2 people would like to volunteer to interview the potential executive director.
I'll volunteer.
Okay, we got one.
I would like to suggest maybe Ms. Johnson or Ms. Gilmore be asked if they would like to be on that. If, you know.
Okay. Yeah. Ms. Gilmore, can you hear us?
She's still on the call?
And we can circle back too. Ms. Johnson, you on the phone?
Doesn't look like it.
We could circle back. We don't need to answer right this moment, so we will reconnect with them, and I think Ms. Johnson's probably gonna pop back up here shortly.
Hey, James.
Yeah.
Got to bring it up.
Who's talking? Oh,
It's
okay.
me, it's Philip.
Yep. Uh-huh.
So, and we will, because I'm schedule some conferences and so forth. But I mean, here's a situation where how many of you have law enforcement experience, but you're interviewing an executive director that's going to be involved with the community review board and law enforcement practices. I would like to be a part of that, but since it hasn't been determined what my voice is or what my limits are, what I'm involved with, and that will come in the next couple of weeks. I'll get an answer for that. But that's something I would like to be involved with if other folks cannot, or more people can be on that interview panel. I'm just throwing it out there. Just let it hang, let it marinate, and we'll address it before the next meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
oh, got another face popped up.
I'm sorry.
Used to John Blair. Used to John Blair popping up.
You guys are going to hate when my face keeps popping up. I keep turning my video off because my connection is stronger without the video going. So that's why I keep popping. Yeah. Just for your information, the reason the participation is limited to 2 is because of the Freedom of Information Act. So if it's 3, then it would be considered a public meeting, and that's a difficult way to do a personnel interview. So that's why it's 2.
And I was asking, for the other ladies to be considered first, at least asked, and then, have a contingency plan just to kind of broaden,
Yeah.
what our board looks like.
Okay, well, we don't need to decide right this second on that. And we can just let it all marinate. And then, we'll make sure that we ask Ms. Johnson and Ms. Gilmore. I mean, we do need a diversity. We can't, ideally not be all male or all this or all that. So we'll get in touch with them and we'll find out their interest and availability, and we'll go from there. All right. But anyway, we're getting closer. So that's a good thing, because we definitely need a full-time, 100% dedicated person sitting at the helm and, making us even better. So we were planning on having Councilman Payne here tonight, but, as you guys probably know, they have a session going on right now, City Council. I think we probably all agree that we need to be able to meet more frequently. We got to figure out a way to do that in the pandemic, but not even just us figure out a way to do that, but we also need to get the city to give us the thumbs up. Now, Lisa and I had a conversation the other day. She was talking about a format. Maybe you can explain that the Neighborhood Development Services does in order to continue to have multiple meetings. And, that could be a possibility. If you could expand on that, what they're doing.
So I don't know if any of you have ever watched this, but Neighborhood Development Services has a type of meeting that is called a public site plan conference. And that is a meeting in which, instead of having something be fully staffed like this meeting is, they set it up so that it can be conducted electronically, but that it can be recorded. So it allows people to do the business of the site plan conference. It may or may not allow the general public to speak during that meeting, but they can watch it, and then everybody can access the recording of that meeting later on the website. So for a meeting in which you want to talk about working on your procedures or your ordinance, where it's more like a work session for you, that might be one option. So it's basically like a Zoom meeting that you all could participate in together. It would be recorded. There just wouldn't necessarily be an interaction or an interface with the public to have them speaking during that meeting. So that might be one possible format, just to allow you to have some time to work with each other, but also there would still be a public record of it for people to watch. But otherwise, there are other boards and commissions as well that are still only having one meeting a month, because there's only so many Joe Rices and Brian Wheelers to go around. And so that's really what drives the number of meetings that they have staff to have, like this one, where you have like a moderator who lets people in and out and that sort of thing.
So Mr. Blair sent us a email saying, no, I guess it was Mr. Payne, I'm not sure, that A, we could have a 3-hour meeting once a month. And then B, there would be first come, first served subcommittee meetings. Now, can we grab a subcommittee meeting every month?
Yeah. So if it's okay if I interject here, this is Max.
Sure.
So I actually spoke to Chairman Watson about this yesterday, day before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you guys actually have 2 options available to you. The communications department is able to support a 3-hour meeting, board meeting for you. So you could actually increase your meeting time by, to 3 hours. And then they're offering these subcommittee meetings. And what they're offering is 6 subcommittee meetings on a first come, first served basis. So you could grab one of those and use them for a second board meeting. So essentially you have 6 hours total available to you in a month's time, of course, in 3-hour increments where, hopefully you can get a lot of work done.
Max, can I ask you a question? They recently had a work session about all their boards and commissions. And as I was listening to most of it, did they ever decide that they were going to decommission some of these boards and commissions that might result in some additional time being carved back into the communications department?
Well, at this time, they are allowing all boards and commissions 1 3-hour meeting per month. So, yeah.
And Max, I'll interject here and say that with the 6 subcommittee meetings, that it is first come, first served per month.
Right.
So you're saying per month, it's not on a standing basis? Joe?
That's correct. Yeah. For the subcommittee meetings. That's correct. Per month.
Mr. Rice, do those subcommittee meetings go pretty quickly?
As Max said, we're usually capping at 3 hours, and this is all council driven.
I'm talking about these at the first come, first serve.
Not currently.
Okay.
But I've actually already snatched you guys a spot for this month and next month. So if you're wanting to have another 3-hour meeting this month and next month, it's already available. Just need to set a date. Yeah.
Can we have guests help us out with those meetings, augment us, or is that just us? Am I on mute? Yeah. So Lisa or Max, are we allowed to, if we need somebody within the legal community to kind of help us out, or is it just us in that environment?
So I think that Max may be able to speak, but I think that's more a function of whether someone like Joe can help you make that interface.
It's the same as the type of meeting you're having right now.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing changes.
Good. All right. That's good to know. It was a little confusing. Okay.
It is a little confusing.
Yeah, I mean, you explained, we talked a little bit about it, but I wouldn't, okay, well, that's good. I don't want to muck it up and confuse it. So we just got to pick a date, right? And then that's got to be available on your calendar.
Yep.
Right. Okay. All right. Do y'all want to try to pick a date now while we're all together instead of having like 80 different emails shooting around? What do you guys want to do?
Okay. Will this allow for public comment? Because I really, think that we're doing public's work and I don't really want to see them being shut out of any particular, even if it's a work type session.
It will. These meetings will be conducted and be in the same format as the one you're holding right now.
Thank you, Max, by the way.
Yep.
All right. So, let's see here. Today is the 12th. Tell you what, I don't know what everybody's schedule is obviously different.
We have Thanksgiving week in there, everything. So,
yeah, 2 weeks from now is Thanksgiving. I know a little earlier is kind of a little better for me, but.
This year, I think a lot of folks are putting off any type of, so many of us are putting off any family type things. With the spread going on,
Yeah, I'm not traveling to California. So.
Yeah.
Well, why not, Bill?
I have no family there.
You could always drive.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, you know what? Miss Johnson's trying to get back on. She just sent me a text. So
I'm back. Can you hear me?
There she goes. Look at her. Here we go.
Yes.
Right, excellent.
You see, that's what you call dedication. At work, on the meeting, got off work, ran home, got back on the meeting.
Right.
Yeah, just one comment about our next meeting is that we can set 3 hours aside, but we need to have something to do in those 3 hours.
Yeah.
So that would mean, we would need to make a plan. Okay, these are the powers that we want to talk about having. It might be a little better either put off that decision for a few days till we figure out what's going on, or make it fairly late in the month, at which point we're sure we'll have something to talk about.
Okay.
I mean, don't we have two types of things? I mean, there's the process that you want to do for these hearings that you're working on. And then, of course, I think both Kim and Delegate Hudson said, if we want to talk about these new powers to kind of maybe incorporate the old or inaugural PCRB. So it sounds like two different.
Yeah.
How about 24 November? 24 November.
That's Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
Well,
that's fine. No, I
mean,
don't have a problem with
either that or next week, but I know I'm not, I know how everybody is, what their availability is for a quick turnaround.
Tuesday the 24th is good with me.
I think the reality is this too. There's just going to be some times where everybody can't all show up. As long as everybody's working, I mean, we all have, different schedules, work schedule, lives, families, a lot going on. So, I mean, I think when the previous board worked, there was, the majority was there, but there was different times where, folks had to work remote, even though we're all working remote, they had their assignments and, they got them done. But I think we should at least put a date. Hopefully I'm not regretting that date because I didn't do a whole lot of research on that particular day and what my wife's schedule was looking like and everything with the kids. But as of now, how about that? Let's say 24 November. But the city's got to look at what they have available too that week.
Yeah, I'm flexible, so
I'm fine.
Okay. Is it? I know, Ms. Johnson, you get off at 5 o'clock.
No, sir. I get off at 6 o'clock.
Oh, 6 o'clock. Oh,
and lately, I've been working till 7. But
okay.
If it's the 24th, as long as I got a date in advance, I'll just have to plan and try to. I'll just put in to leave work a little early, so I can.
I personally would like to, if we can get it started a little earlier. Meetings, you start late and you go late, and then it becomes ineffective, right? I mean, if you start at like 6:30, 7 o'clock, you go until 9:30. I know I watch some of the city council meetings. I'm like, my eyes are rolling back in my head. I'm falling asleep. Even Monday Night Football, same thing, So, if we can head towards a 5 o'clock, that would be desirable to me. How you guys
okay, feel? So y'all are shooting for the 24th at 5. Is that what you're shooting for?
Yes, ma'am. 5 to 8, because 6 to 9, that last hour and a half, that's late.
So that 9 o'clock, till 9 o'clock. Okay, it's a little rough sometimes, especially when you've worked all day.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, 24th.
Mm-hmm.
All righty.
All right.
Okie dokie.
Max, you are a superstar. Thanks for getting that in for us.
Yep, no problem.
See, what was the other thing? Oh, now that we have Ms. Johnson back in action, we wanted you guys to, give us some input, feedback, and update on community outreach.
Nancy and I?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Nancy, I'll start and then you can go in as well. Want to do that?
Sure, but you're pretty thorough, so that may not leave much for me.
No, I'm not at all. Well, Nancy and I, we met and we discussed some things as far as community outreach. It's going to be quite a task in trying to gain trust. That's going to be, it's going to be difficult. Trying to get the community to trust us and to know that we're here to help them. And then with COVID being in our midst, it's even more difficult. But we thought of a couple of things, just kind of like having very small community forum meetings, like, at a library, and maybe having no more than maybe 10 people. And we have different library locations that we could do that at. The library was one, and Nancy, it's been so long since we talked about this.
Well, I mean, depending on how this winter is, I mean, I'm not sure if it's going to be a cold one or one of those La Nina ones where it's not quite as cold. That, we even thought Tonsler Park, maybe doors open to the community room if that was possible. Yeah. Just something to start getting us out there. Because I know, like Bill said, he said, a lot of people don't know we exist, or they don't see us out there, doing things. And we do have to get the community to trust us, because Lord knows there's lots of things.
And maybe even a possibility of maybe even radio time. So, on a radio station occasionally or something, to, just to have a small discussion and to put it out there that we're here, that's a thought. And reaching out.
Yeah, because
going to some of the housing communities that have centers or have places within them that they have meetings, or or have like an area there that inside those places, in those communities where we can go inside and have, again, small group meetings, no more than 10. And talk about why we're here and what we're doing. That's a thought as well. So we really want to try to get into the communities that feel that they are having more of the issues with the police department. And so that's what, don't you think that, how do you think that sounds?
Yeah, I mean, that's we have to listen to stories. I mean, we can't do things unless we know what's going on, in the community. And they're all, the various different types of police interactions. I mean, there's interactions in neighborhoods, there's interactions. Well, I mean, school is, a toss now, but you have SROs, there's interactions there. When people who are dealing with shelter situations, because, we do have had a complaint about, some interaction with someone, who was probably, I don't know, still is, was dealing with the issue of homelessness. So there's, interactions there. There's, people who, like, I think Bill was saying, people who witness things, they're not actually receiving, those, what they perceive as extraordinary, reactions from the police department, but they witness it. So it's trying to be in those spaces and make people feel comfortable, so they want to come forward and they want to talk, maybe on camera, if, or whatever, that kind of thing. So, and then I think we're talking about one time, James, advisory panels, when as we go along in this work, and there are specific issues that maybe we get through this pandemic at some point in the next, God, when 24 months, I don't know, that we impanel that kind of stuff. So these are baby steps, I think, that we're making, to try
it's just so much more difficult when we have this pandemic. It just makes everything so much harder. So it's going to, you know, by being harder, it's going to take more time. So that, you know, this pandemic is just a monster to deal with in itself. So it's just not making our lives much easier.
So
If you all reached out to any community organizations like City of Promise or Abundant Life Ministries, any of those groups? Maybe
I am going to be reaching out and talking with someone with Abundant Life because they are located directly across the street from my house.
Okay.
They actually purchased my dad's house.
Oh, okay.
So I know them personally.
Yeah.
So I will be talking with them, and that is, I'll get that done as soon as I can. It's just a matter of catching up with people, you know. And when you work, it's just so hard, and you don't see, and they're not there every day. It's not someone over there every single day. So, but I'll be reaching out to Abundant Life.
Mr. C.
The shelters and enclosed facilities in our parks are managed by Parks and Recreation.
Yeah.
I know a guy.
Yeah.
So I can see what the process is for securing those. Currently, those facilities are all closed per council's action. And I can find out what is involved to have meetings at dates, times, and capacity, if you would like. If not, you can, you know, I'll be more than happy to find that information out for you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. No problem. And I may reach out to my pastor because he has a talk show that he does on public television, and that might be something that I can talk to him about, and we might can have something on there and that would be a good way of getting into everybody's homes by television as well. So I just thought about that. So I'll check on that too.
There's a really good program on 1013 Jams on Sundays. In my humble opinion, love that show, and maybe they will have a couple of us as guests. So I guess if it's more than two of us, that's also a public meeting. But you know, maybe we can reach out to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
All righty.
All right. So we are getting close to the final grand finale.
Hey, James, there was one thing I wanted to mention relative to your meeting on the 24th.
Yes,
Council actually has a work session scheduled for that day. I don't know if you were hoping to hear from Councilor Payne, but in the event that you were, he won't be available. So
and then, okay. Well,
just putting that information out there.
I think some of the stuff we wanted from him, you know, were communicate. I mean, I wouldn't let that be a showstopper, but that's good to know.
Yeah, I just wanted you to know.
Yeah. And we can always connect with them by email, you know, prior to the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, well, so our final item on the agenda is public comments. But before we go into that, did anybody want to discuss anything else? Good. Okay. Joe, do you have any people waiting to provide comment?
Looks like we do. And I just want to say, if anyone would like to address the board for this final public comment opportunity, please click the raise hand icon, or if you're joining us by phone, press *9. And right now we do have Miss Kate Fraley, and she is on with the board. Kate, you have 3 minutes.
She's muted. It looks
There I go. So, hi.
I just wanted to follow up and ask a clarifying question about the number of complaints. Those are the number of complaints you stated were complaints that you received? And what about complaints from that finished the 75 days that would have come to you from the CPD?
I don't have that number for you right now. I can give you that. You're talking about everything since November 4th of 2019.
Right. And I just want to tell you that that the I don't know if you got them in a lump sum or if they're giving them to you as the 75. Anyway, you can't see one. Let me read what John Blair wrote to me in June when I asked him that question about November 4th. Second, the PCRB cannot hear a review of a complaint about any incident that occurred more than a year after the date. So as of today, you can't hear any that were any earlier than November 12th, 2019. So as time goes on, you won't be able to get those historic ones if you haven't gotten them already. So have you gotten them?
Well, you know, I don't know that. I don't know that it's 100% certain that we if we asked that they wouldn't give them to us. But I believe there's a 75-day window that somebody has to, I'm going to say the word contest.
They have 75 days to finish. So is my understanding. And so then they finish. And then if it's not in court or it's not some other things, then you all should get them automatically, is my understanding. And so it's a year, all the way back a year.
Oh, okay, the chief just popped up.
Hey.
Hi. Do we want to allow Ms. Fraley to continue with hers and then answer after so she doesn't use her 3 minutes in case she has another question first?
No, I'm done. That was the only thing.
So thank you. So Chair Watson, you're actually correct. There is no automatic sending over of any complaints, period. They all have to be appealed to the CRB for review. They have 75 days at the conclusion of a finding to make that appeal. The CRB cannot hear any complaint that was not filed in the past 1 year. So if the incident occurred in 2018 and they wanted to file a complaint through the CRB, that is not an avenue. However, that does not preclude them. And we're, our language should be the same, is that they have a year also with certain ones, with the exception if it ever could arise to a criminal complaint, particularly a felony where there is no statute of limitations here in the state of Virginia. So there is not an automatic kicking over complaints to an individual that did not exist prior. Your power at this point only is if someone requests that there's an additional review or hearing after we've completed ours, if there is a finding of that is not sustained at this point. And Ms. Robertson is on as well, and I'm sure she could add more clarifying language. As for what Ms. Fraley was asking, my understanding is there's the assumption that any complaint that was filed prior to November the 11th, that there is a year and that we automatically give you any complaint. That is not the case. Ms. Robertson is still on. I'm sure she could help with that clarifying since she assisted with that ordinance as well.
Chair Watson, Ms. Fraley looks like she is re-raising her hand. She did not finish her allotted time. Would you like her to speak some more?
Yes, sir. Just to finish out her, continue her question.
Ms. Fraley, you're on with the board.
So there.
It's a follow-up then. So since the Charlottesville Police Department isn't required to pass those on, from the time you all were appointed to the time that was more than a year ago, those people wouldn't have known
and still don't know that they can appeal. So do you see my gist of my comment? That if it is, I mean, since it is that they have to make the person, the complainant has to make the effort to send it to or have it sent to the PCRB, they wouldn't have known that and may not even know it now, that they still have an opportunity if they wanted to have that reviewed. So what I'm recommending is that you somehow figure out a way to, in your community involvement, to let people know, or ask the CPD to send the policy, the new policy, or because the PCRB is active now, that those people have that opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Fraley, but that's still actually incorrect. Even within the last year, they would still only have 75 days at the closing. You only get up to a year to file a complaint, period, is what the ordinance says. So you can't file a complaint from 2 years ago with the CRB. It has to be, any complaint has to be within the last 365 days to file a complaint. For individuals who have already filed a complaint, they then have 75 days at the end of a closure to then make an appeal to the PCRB if they would like an additional review of the complaint.
So essentially, I don't know that we could go back before March of 2020, as far as, unless it was an initial complaint, right?
So a complainant has up to a year to file a complaint with you, a new complaint.
Right.
So it's a year prior. If they wanted to leverage the CRB, they could only do that within the year's time frame. If they want to leverage the CRB for a completed complaint, they have 75 days after that final process. And there is just a process. It's not just the closing. It's that there's been a letter, as well as they've leveraged all of their appeals, i.e. wanting to have a conversation to review the complaint with the investigator or CPD or myself.
What about situations in which the complaints were just within 75 days and perhaps are still in the process? There's not been any determination.
If there is a complaint that is still in some sort of holding pattern because there's not a determination, that does not affect the person who has filed the complaint's outcome and their ability to leverage. Remember, it's at the completion, when the complaint has fully run through its entire process, that they have 75 days from that time to leverage the CRB as an additional resource and a reviewing body.
So if a complaint is filed in November 2019 and it's still open, still unresolved, I mean, that's just, we're gone beyond the 75-day period. So now we automatically have a
No.
Okay.
If a complaint is still open, there is no 75-day clock that's ticking.
It closes, yeah.
It has to wait until it completely closes before the 75-day clock starts to tick. Prior to that, there are no time constraints, with the exception of filing a new complaint. So there is a real distinction. New complaints have 1 year. So you can file a complaint with the CRB from November the 12th of 2019 forward as a new complaint. The clock for 75 days does not start ticking until it has run its entire process, including closure. There's been an investigation, there's been closure, there's been a determination of a finding, and then that person has 75 days to leverage it. So if we close a complaint today, I don't know, have my calendar in front of me, but they would have 75 days if they were not satisfied with the outcome or the entire process to ask the CRB to review it, i.e. the current case that you have in front of you that you're working out the process for January could not happen until that case closed. And then the person said, I want to review with the CRB. And that's the one you're currently working with, and it is working as the system was designed.
And I was just reviewing, I wanted to make clear that it's the 1 year is triggered by an actual incident. So just to know that it's saying that you can, file anew, but just making sure that the trigger is the actual incident itself. So there are two triggers that we're looking at, the incident and then also the closure, as Dr. Brackney has stated.
That is correct. Member Brown, yes.
So the oldest non-new we could have ever looked at would have been 75 days before we had our first meeting. Technically, if it was a non-new, if it's a legacy, filing, right?
So, I mean, there could have been overlapping that you had your first meeting and it was already 35 days into the process where they could have had that. They doesn't mean they still don't have the opportunity. Now, remember, you can't have any meetings until you've been fully formed, and that took that time in that process. So, unfortunately, that may have cut into their time frame. But you've been up for a while and running since June. So there are persons, if they were interested, would have had to then, remember, leverage the entire process, including, it's not just that there's a closure, it's that there was a closure. They were unhappy with the results. So they then went to the investigator and requested that meeting as well. You don't get to skip steps and just say, we're closing, we don't like it, and then we're going to leverage the CRB. The caveat is there has to be a finding in which they've also gone through the process.
All right, thank you. Anybody got any more comments, ideas, questions? I don't know if I should go into this, but it may be good to, while we're all together, let me ask Ms. Johnson, would you like to, are you still there, Ms. Johnson?
Here.
Okay, so we are going to be interviewing the executive director, and we need at least two of us. Would you like to be one of the two?
Sure.
Okay. All right, great. So we got Ms. Johnson. Do we want to try to ask Ms. Gilmore? What do we want to do? Okay, Bellamy Brown said he wanted to do it first. He was straight out the gun, actually. So I think Ms. Johnson, Mr. Bellamy Brown, to tried and true Charlottesville locals, been there for generations. As far as I'm concerned, that works. If there's no wrestling comments or anything else, I think we can call this meeting adjourned. And we'll be, all right, see you guys.
Okay. All right, good night, everybody. Stay safe.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.